a few seconds to, thank you. Come on in. We'll go ahead and get started for sake of time. Hope you're all doing well this Thursday morning. I'm Pedro Caro, and I will be your moderator for this wonderful session, Higher Education Institutions Supporting their K12 Partners. Just a few things before I bring on our presenters. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available to you via the SCADA app, I want to say, at the end of today's conference, as well as the materials will be accessible to you all as well. If you could please be muted for the duration of the presentation, that'd be appreciated. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat function, and we'll do our best to get to all of those very much. So I'd like to bring on to the virtual stage, Commissioner Charles, is it Nies? Nies, I'm sorry, okay.
That's all good.
Commissioner Nies, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning to learn more about not only how the expectation has fallen on so many of you all working in our school systems to support our scholars as they complete the financial aid documents, so the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act application in particular. And so we wanted to make sure that you all knew that there were so many other opportunities to think about your higher ed partners as partners in this process. And so our session today is going to really talk about some of those shared goals that we have with you as you move forward and you work on these initiatives to support our scholars in completing these documents. We also wanted to maybe highlight some of those resources that could exist that a lot of times people don't even know that you could ask for and think about as resources in supporting you in this process. We have a Center for Educational Partnership, as well as our financial aid office here at our campus, and I'll talk a little bit more about our campus in a bit, that are really there to do some programs, and we want to do some sample models, as well as we want to think about how do you engage your higher ed partners in this process. So as was mentioned, my name is Commissioner Nies, but in my full-time job, I serve as the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at the University of California, Merced. And part of my portfolio oversees our enrollment management teams, as well as kind of everything that happens with our students once they show up on our campus to make sure we're supporting them and supporting their success here at UC Merced moving forward. Just a little bit about our campus to give you a sense of why this conversation is important for us. Over 75% of our undergraduate scholars on our campus are first-generation college students, with well over 60% of them receiving Pell Grants. And so as we think about the role of financial aid and the role that that plays in supporting our scholars moving forward, this partnership with our high school counselors and the amazing work that you all do on a regular basis with our scholars is really important because it helps and supports them in their pathway and their success as they come onto our campus. And so we are super excited to have this conversation with you, given who we have at UC Merced and the way that we serve them. Throughout the presentation, I've got a couple of my colleagues that will introduce themselves at that time, but excited to have some of our colleagues from our Center for Educational Partnership, as well as our financial aid office, who are going to join me in this presentation today and share some of their thoughts and their insights as we move forward. As I said, we hopefully will be able to answer some of your questions. At the end of our presentation, we've built in time to respond to and ask some of the questions you might have. But along the way, feel free to put things into the chat, and we can then look at how we might be able to respond to some of those in real time as we move forward. So again, thank you for joining us and thinking about how we can do and move forward on some of these initiatives. As I said, there are some shared goals, and these shared goals exist between institutions of higher education, as well as the work that you all do in our high schools in serving our scholars and moving them forward. And some of that is that, you know, really at the end of the day, if we have more students that are filling out the financial aid forms, that means that more students are going to increase their interest in going to college, and that helps all of us meet our mission. Particularly those of us in your higher education partners. Our mission is to educate scholars on our campuses. And so the more that we're able to create that pathway for them and support them because they filled out the FAFSA or they filled out the CADA, that really is important and that really matters. And so, so there is a shared goal there in increasing those completion rates because it really adds to the college going rates. The other piece that it does for us is it gives us the opportunity to connect with the work that you are doing around college and career readiness. And in particular, our part is that college readiness work. And so the opportunity for us to connect with you, to learn more about the workshops that we could potentially provide in thinking about college readiness work, that's where a holistic approach to working with FAFSA and CADA completion rates really helps us. So it's not just that one time and filling out the forms, but how does that then get connected with those broader efforts that you all are doing in college readiness work? And we are super excited to think about how we can support some of that early outreach and that early outreach work that you all are already doing. So again, another shared goal that exists with a lot of your post-secondary institutions and the work that you all are doing. And lastly, and most importantly, at least from our point at UC Merced, is partnering with you all in doing this work really helps support the equity and access mission that so many post-secondary institutions have. Again, at our institution, with over 75% of them being first gen, more than 60% Pell eligible, we have about 7% of our undergraduate students identify as undocumented scholars. And so the CADA completion rates for us is also a really important piece as we're thinking about how do we provide that access to post-secondary education, and really began to break down some of those barriers that historically have had individuals think that college is not an option for them, and really began to address some of those racial inequities, as well as social economic inequities and first-gen inequities that have existed. And thinking about how do we reach out and support some of that effort. And even thinking about the connection with other populations. For example, we have a really strong foster youth and former foster youth program on our campus. That, again, doing some of these shared goals around providing information and resources that help address the equity and access mission is a really important shared goal that exists between your institutions and what you are doing in your high schools, as well as the work that we are doing on our campuses. And so we're excited to think about that shared goal and the partnerships that could exist here for us to move forward and help accomplish the expectations around financial aid completion of documents. I'm really excited to introduce my colleague, Jody Gerber. Jody works in our financial aid office, and she's one of our assistant directors. And she does a lot of this outreach work already. And I'm going to turn it over to her to talk about some of the financial aid offices and the resources within them and the workshops that they might be able to do in partnering with you. Jody?
Thank you, Dr. Neese. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. And above all, thank you all for the work you do each and every day. It is so needed and so much appreciated. I just wanted to give you some statistics on the class of 2021 from the National College Attainment Network. And the high school class of 2021 left more than $3.75 billion in federal aid unclaimed as a direct result of not filing a FAFSA. So that's huge. And in 2021, 53% of high school students had submitted a FAFSA by June 30th, compared to 61% average in most recent prior years. So that's nationwide. The initiative to have this be a graduation requirement for FAFSA and CADA for California is new, starting with the class of 2023. And the history of this is Louisiana was the first state to make it a graduation requirement with the class of 2018. And as of the first year, they had a 10% increase. And in 2021, Louisiana had the second highest financial aid application completion rate in the country, 68%. First was Tennessee at 71%, and both had required the financial aid application to be completed for graduation. The three new states that are starting this year are California, Alabama, and Colorado. So, and some of the things that we do to support these efforts and to help our community And students is we have workshops on completing a FAFSA and KDAP complete application. We have workshops on how financial aid works, and they can be accessed anywhere. We offer virtual resources. We have workshops not only on those items, but also on financial wellness, because students can learn lifelong skills about financial wellness while they're here. We have a financial wellness center that provides free financial coaching sessions on preparing for college to beyond starting your career. And I'd just like to end my piece with sharing a quote from Marlene Garcia, the executive director of Csac, that I found very profound when I read this. The worst scenario would be that if these students that are already convinced that they are not college material, that they just say, why am I going to fill out this form? I'm not going to college and will just opt out. We have to be partners together to encourage students to complete these applications and provide the support that they need. And the last part of her quote was, we have to be bold in helping students understand that most any good livable wage job requires some training or education beyond high school. So that's the message we want to impart to our students. And as a higher ed institution and your higher ed partners are willing to help and share resources with you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your higher ed partners, and you're certainly welcome to use any resources on our website, and we can share those with you if you'd like as well. Even if your student's not coming to UC Merced, we're more than happy to share. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jody, and the work that you do. And just to reiterate already, Jody and the team in our financial aid office are often going into the surrounding high schools and doing these workshops. And I think part of the other element that becomes really important for us, but one of the things that we know, particularly low-income students, have a much higher rate of being identified for verification of their financial aid documents once they come to campus. We have seen upward of 40% of our scholars at some point in time have to submit additional documents because maybe there was something they did on their FAFSA that then doesn't connect with their family's federal tax forms. And all of that creates a need for verification documents. And the more that we can help support you all so that some of that documentation is done upfront in a way that prevents verification down the road, that eliminates some of those barriers that we see that prevent our scholars from actually showing up on campus or receiving their financial aid. So we are really active partners in our local high schools, and we encourage you to think about how you might do that as well. I'm also excited to introduce one of my other colleagues. UC Merced has a large Center for Educational Partnership, and that center does K12 outreach throughout the Central Valley. Daniel Lepe has joined us today. He is the project director of our College Advising Corps, which does outreach work using near-peer advising on recent college graduates that are going into schools and helping to do some of that work. Daniel does a ton of outreach in the surrounding area and is our project director, on top of being a wonderful human being himself. And so I'm super excited to turn this over to Daniel. He's going to share more what we do from kind of some of that K12 outreach partnerships. Daniel?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Like Dr. Nice mentioned, my name is Daniel Lepe. My pronouns are he, him. I've been with the Center for Educational Partnerships for almost 10 years, and I've had the opportunity to work with multiple districts, see multiple models that districts have at the different high schools when it comes to supporting students with financial aid, college applications, and things as such. Today, I want to talk to you all a little bit about the different partnerships that we have within the Central Valley, and in addition, share a little bit more about what the center does when it comes to providing support not only to our cohort programs, but also to the high school partners within the districts that we're partnered with. In addition, I will also be highlighting some of our new partnerships that we have in place and the impact we've been able to put in place just by implementing a certain structure and sharing that structure with you as well. So and on the previous slide, you're able to see some of our partnerships. We currently are at 6 different counties in the Central Valley. At a high point, we were at up to 8. Currently, right now, we are expressing interest in expanding some of our partnerships. If you have any questions in regard to that, feel free to reach out to me or our Associate Vice Chancellor, Orquídea Largo, to see if there's any possibility to partner up with our center. But again, we're expanding. We're doing our best to bring equity and access to students in some of the more underrepresented areas of the Central Valley. Our center at one point started with just one program. Started with the UC Scholars Program. Many counselors know this program as EAOP, the Early Academic Outreach Program, or DCAC, Destination College Advising Corps. Now, as time has progressed, we've grown quite a bit. We've gone from one program to now serving 9. We have had the privilege as of late to be able to be at 28 different high schools and be able to serve up to 29 middle schools in the form of, having a program on campus or bringing math and English enrichment to our sites. Some of the services that we provide for students range, like I mentioned previously. We do anything from supporting students with the FAFSA, with the California DREAM Act, with financial aid verification assistance, financial aid application completion, you name it. We support students with UC application, CSU application, community college. You can read them off the slide, but for us, what we really take importance to is to assuring that all of our advisors, not only our near peer advisors, but our staff as well, our coordinators and program advisors, to assure that they're getting the appropriate training to be placed at a site and not only become an asset for the student, but also an asset for the counselors. We try to develop relationships in a way where counselors could utilize them as a resource to facilitate presentations. We teach them how to cross-collaborate with not only counselors, but also with other pre-college programs within the high schools like CalSoap or other TRIO programs within other universities in the surrounding areas. One of the main pieces that we've also been taking into consideration as of late is tied around the math and English enrichment. And we've had also the opportunity to create academies for students where we're front loading them to prepare them for high school level math or English. So what do you see here on the chat? I don't know if you're willing to, or if any of you have seen this graph before. What do you see? Super low completion rates. Okay. Thank you, Ruben. So this is actually the race to submit dashboard that Csac has, where you're able to see the application rates for high schools. The graph you see in front of us is actually the one that represents California public high schools. You'll be able to see the students who have submitted in the yellow, where you see the 53% for class of 2021, and the orangish color, yellow-orange color for class of 2022. Comparing apples to apples, it looks like we're rebounding a little bit from those students who kind of started their 2021 year, maybe as virtual students, and we're seeing some growth. In the following slide, you'll be able to find a new partnership that we were able to put in place with one of our pre-college programs that serves the whole senior class. At a certain district, we were able to support them in a way where we were able to take, obviously, a major need and change it to take that district from, or that high school from being the lowest performing in the district to being the highest performing in the district, just by bringing initiatives and an advisor that is able to provide a lot of follow-up in regard to the interventions related to FAFSA and California DREAM Act. I ran some data in regard to this school site, and I also saw some correlation that the higher the financial aid completion, the higher the application completion as well. This high school is also at a rate where they're closing in on 80% college application rate for all of their seniors. And currently they have 410 seniors that serve the actual site. So the question, how did we get here? So the way we got here, I'm going to show it to you in this next slide. It started in September, started early on. This timeline that I'm providing you is not only a timeline that we implemented at the site, but it's a timeline that we try to follow for all of our programs to really, I guess you could say, live the equity and access mission for our students. We try to make it systemic across the board so we could provide our school partners the necessary support to be able to close the gap of students who are not completing the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. So as early as September, we're focusing on promoting financial aid, promoting the UC, the CSU application during our parent senior nights. We've found that that initiative has really allowed parents to kind of see the whole process, and we were able to do it both in the language of English and in Spanish, which is a huge benefit given the population that we serve. Another thing that we also added, and many of you are probably already doing this, is we created FSAID or we coordinated FSAID workshops in the classroom in collaboration with the local community college, the Center for Educational Partnerships, and also the staff, the counseling staff on campus. So working together to bring the workshops to the students to really provide them an idea of what you need to do to basically complete an application is something that we find very essential and that we try to implement immediately when it comes to the student's senior year. Another thing that we found that's very important is to have targeted follow-up towards the students. So doing outreach to those students who weren't able to be a part of these FSAID workshops. The way we did it, we have a monitoring system within the Center for Educational Partnerships where we're able to see who participated in these workshops, who didn't, so we could kind of be strategic and have our advisors at the site doing that outreach for the students. Then in October, what we noticed is that the biggest success when it comes to college completion early on is both the classroom presentations that take place for students. Sometimes they'll be in the classroom, sometimes they'll be opt-in in the library. But what we've learned is that usually the ones in the classroom are the ones that have higher rates of success, because we've noticed that at those sites, students have higher rates of completing their application. Another thing that we do is we collaborate with the local community college, local Cal SOAP organizations, and we bring financial aid nights for students in the fall, where we sometimes not only do we support students, but we also increase parent engagement when it comes to these initiatives. And again, I can't stress enough the tracking and how important it is when it comes to making sure that students get that support. Also, we've taken our college application workshops that we have during the day, and we've actually, we've gotten to the point where our initial applications will be separated into UC and CSU, but as we go on, we basically combine them and we just bring the space to the student that revolves around college access. So we support students with the UC, the CSU, and financial aid applications accordingly. Then when November comes around, things do slow down a little bit for us. But again, we do make it an open door policy to be able to set up individual appointments with our students in the month. Once December comes around, that's when FAFSA starts picking up again. We start providing follow-up for students who still don't have a financial aid application on file. We provide walk-in support for students during lunch and after school. And what we found that it's also extremely important is to figure out how to connect with the students who don't have a FAFSA on file. And a way that we've been doing it as well is by looking at the Csac completion reports that Csac can provide, to be able to see what students have completed, what students have errors on their application, what students have incomplete applications, to be able to provide that further follow-up to the students and ensure that they're completing their application on time. We found that schools that don't have access to these reports have struggled a little bit more when it comes to their financial aid completion, but we've managed to figure out ways to be able to connect them with Csac to be able to get these reports for them. And again, targeted weekly school financial aid day, targeted weekly school day financial aid workshops are also the key. So bring one once a week. It could be, during sixth period. It could be during what some folks call the professional learning community period, or the pride time. We maximize on that time to be able to provide support for students and just offer our services to students when it comes to financial aid. Also, what we found too, that when it comes to informing parents, text messaging is the way to go. We do our best to use our in-house built-in text messaging system in our database to be able to do that outreach, send mass text to parents, informing them that their student is able to get support when it comes to the FAFSA and the DREAM Act. And then in February, everything intensifies. It gets, and I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about right now. We provide walk-in support during lunch and after school. We provide targeted weekly school day financial aid workshops. Some of them have been at large scale. Some of them have been at smaller scales to make it more, I guess you could say, interactive with the students. And then we provide webinars through the Center for Educational Partnerships for any student who is a part of a partner school. And that is leading to the date of March 2nd. And then lastly, again, follow-up, parent notifications, those text messages, those emails, those phone calls are key when it comes to providing support for or notifications to parents. Our work does not end on March 2nd. I know with my staff, I am closely monitoring their dashboards, making sure students are getting that support they need, and also bring this the support to the counselors. We continue to provide a walk-in support during lunch. We continue the whole targeted approach in reaching out to students who have an application in progress or who have no application on file. So doing our best to provide that follow-up is essential for us to help our students succeed. We also focus on them creating their web grants accounts. We focus on sending notifications to parents. And like Charles mentioned, financial verification support is crucial. We help students submit any, different documents that the universities are requesting, regardless of what university they plan or college they plan to attend. And more than anything, something that we do really find important is front loading our juniors about these timelines that they'll have their senior year. So again, this is part of the timeline and part of the initiatives that we provide with students to be able to help them complete the financial aid application. And lastly, what we found that the most success we've had is by tracking students. Having access to live data is essential for us. We do as much as we can to cross-collaborate with counselors, with CalSOAP representatives, with other pre-college program representatives, and seeing how we could use our student information systems, Google Docs, SharePoint, Excel sheets, things like that, to be able to monitor students and eliminate the duplication of services. We find that communication is essential in this process. access to the financial aid status reports is also important. We found that, these Csac reports prevent us from calling in students just to ask them a question if they did their FAFSA. These Csac reports actually, help us eliminate the need to remove the student from classroom time. So it's helped a lot. Like I mentioned previously, building communication, building bonds with relationships, different community organizations is also essential. Front loading our juniors, like I said, crucial, so they could have an idea of what they need to do as seniors. And lastly, what we find to be very important is to create access for students whose parents don't speak English. So sometimes using simple terms for financial aid instead of, like, for example, some parents in the Spanish-speaking communities, they see free financial aid as becas, because becas is tied to free money. And we've learned that the fact that when we use that term, parents are more open to come in and talk to you for both the FAFSA and the DREAM Act, because sometimes when we serve undocumented students, parents are hands off because of the fact that they feel that if they complete the FAFSA, it's going to affect the student's ability to apply for residency at a later time. So they see it more as a government assistance. So they try to avoid it. So we try to bring them to terms so they could understand it and bring more resources for the parents. Okay, so we have a question. Once you start the FAFSA, you have to complete it within 34 days.
And Daniel, while you are looking at that question, we'll circle back and answer that. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other resources that the university might be able to bring to bear and support you. And so, Shelley, we'll get to your question, I promise. I'll turn it back over to Daniel in just a little bit. But sometimes university environments have a whole series of resources that our higher ed partners don't necessarily realize could exist in ways that they could support that. A big part is the near peer. And one of the things that we know with this current age group is that they are more apt to listen to a near peer than they are to listen to someone that has gray hair like I do. And so the more we can think about how we might be able to tap into college students that are on the campuses nearby to actually come into the high school settings and do some of this near peer coaching becomes really important. And so we use a lot of ambassador programs where we hire our students to do some of this outreach work and to be able to connect with the students in the school systems in ways that really helps and supports that process. And so wanted to make sure that that near peer piece becomes a really important tool that a lot of times folks don't think about. There are a lot of conversations going on, particularly among all of the different surf regions across the state of California. Some of you may be involved in those conversations as we are looking at developing these P16 councils and the regional-based collaboratives across schools and high schools and community colleges, CSUs, private institutions, and the UCs. This is an opportunity for us to think about how do we embed in some of those councils resources that would support the FAFSA completion processing. And so I want to make sure that we put that out there, that this funding that is coming from the state of California could be a great opportunity for us to think about ongoing partnerships and the way that we embed those into those proposals and those grant opportunities coming forward. Daniel also shared how we started with just one program when we opened our doors. And we now have 9 different programs that we are supporting. A lot of those are through grant applications. And so the University of California as a research university has a whole grant infrastructure that is part of who we are and part of the way that we operate. And so we're able to reach out to and we're able to partner with high schools that want to sign on and be a part of a grant application for us. We're able to do that with school districts, with individual high schools, our county offices of education, and do joint grant submissions for federal grants, state grants, and other nonprofit charitable organization grants that exist to bring in that additional funding that can support some of this work. So I don't want folks to think about the fact that this might be resource intensive, because there could be different resources that we can tap into. Daniel talked a lot about the parent engagement. This becomes a really important thing for me when we're thinking about FAFSA and CADA completion. I've got a senior in high school right now, and she filled out that FAFSA form back in November. And she couldn't have done it without my involvement or my partner's involvement. And so we needed to be there and support her in that process. So if we don't find ways to engage parents in this conversation, it's going to become even more complicated. And so Daniel mentioned a lot about the outreach that we often do with parents, and we have parent programs in place that we're able to do where we are able to bring that in multiple languages, as Daniel said. One of our parent empowerment programs that we offer through our Center for Educational Partnership, we offer in 3 different languages to really help and support our families so that they understand what's the difference between an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, the community college experience compared to a 4-year degree experience, as well as then how does that fit into the availability of financial support for your scholar moving forward. And I also want to throw out there the opportunity to do campus visits. I think that there is a way for folks to think about using your local or regional community colleges or 4-year institutions that might be close by as a site to do some of these workshops and build in a campus visit so that they can get off the high school grounds and maybe go onto a university or a college campus and use some of those spaces to actually do the workshops right on that campus. So the more we can have them see themselves at that institution, see themselves on a college campus, part of that college readiness work that we're able to do, and connect that to the FAFSA and the FAFSA completion process. The other big piece that Daniel talked about is text messaging capabilities. And so there's a ton of questions, Daniel, about your text messaging capabilities. So before I move on to our last slide and then open it up to questions, I'm going to turn it back over to you to see if you can help out and answer some of the questions that are popping in the chat.
Yes, of course. So we have, so Nora, I noticed your question regarding the text messaging company that we use. We actually use a text message service that's built into one of our databases to do that type of outreach. It's really neat because it gives us the opportunity to be able to also log the interactions in the student profiles that we've had both with the student and the parent. So to answer your question, in all honesty, it's not really, the service provider is basically built into our database. I know that at some sites we do use the Remind application, but there's more limitations to that one as it doesn't really, I guess you could say, help us with tracking the interventions that took place with a certain student, and allows us to log them automatically into the student database. I hope that answers your question. And somebody else asked a question related to virtual advising, text and virtual advising. So when it comes to our texting, that's essential. We do our best to set up timelines in regard to what text messages are going to be sent out in a certain period of time. So for example, whenever the financial aid deadline's around, we're basically texting the students a few days before, then the day before, then the day of, just to remind them that they need to complete the application. And the neat thing is that with us, we're actually able to provide filters and select only the students who have not completed the application within our text messaging database system. And that's really supported us when it comes to like the submission, or not the submission, but increasing the numbers in our area. Also, another thing that we do, we also send news notifications. A big thing was the extension of the CSU application submission deadline. They use certain UCs as well. So we try to kind of make it easier for the students to see it. And like I said, text message is the way to go because we're meeting students where they're at, and you know those notifications come in and they always look at them.
Daniel, there's a question regarding parents' hesitancy to share financial information with their scholar, let alone with a staff member. And as we've seen some of the potential resistance sometimes in sharing that financial information, what are some of the strategies and things that your team has used to help support that process if you've got any ideas or suggestions on that front.
When parents and families are reluctant, the strategy and the approach that we typically take is by providing sometimes sample award letters of like, hey, this is what a student was able to receive. And the way they were able to receive it is by completing this application. All the information you're going to be submitting to the federal Department of Education is all confidential, and it's all linked to the IRS. So it's a very secure platform. Sometimes what I do as well is also provide them guidance so they could maybe start inputting their personal information on their own. So for example, if there's a parent who doesn't want to provide their social to their student per se, right? Or the taxes, I'll just have them start the application with zeros, but not submit it. And then when they get home, I just tell them, look, these are the instructions on what you need to provide in this section by using the more information sections within the application. So more than anything, just teaching the students how to do the application so they could feel comfortable doing it at home on their own, and empowering them in that manner. But again, as far as like forcing parents to provide it or anything like that, we try to meet them where they're at, because again, there may be other external reasons why they don't want to provide that information to us.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Jody, you've got more that you want to add?
Yes, one of the strategies that we've successfully used is finding someone that the parent or parent might be more comfortable with. For example, with our undocumented student population, just using that as an example. There's the fear sometimes of, if I give out my tax information, it's Homeland Security, there's some fears out there. So I will sometimes reach out to our undocumented student services office and ask them to have a conversation with the parent. And that has successfully worked quite often, particularly with filing the application, as well as getting through verification. The other thing that we've successfully done is having a conversation with the student and the parent together, because oftentimes, the parents might think that, why does a student need my information? I'm going to be on the hook for paying and I can't pay for this. So we really try to use, several different strategies to support the student as well as help the parent understand why the information is needed, but it's not obligating them to pay for their students' education.
I also want to add what you mentioned, Jody, having that individual meeting with the parent in person could sometimes also create the comfort for them to be able to bring the documents with them. Because I know at times there's been cases where parents fear that their kids may lose the taxes or anything like that. And we, again, meeting them where they're at. There's been cases where we've even met parents like at a Starbucks or public areas where they feel more comfortable being, and they're able to get that support related to completing a FAFSA.
Thanks, Daniel. Jody, we're seeing some questions about the FAFSA, the 34-day completion period, and the need to do it within that window. Otherwise, it erases everything, and then they have to start all over again. If you could just help out a little bit with that piece, that would be super helpful.
Sure. So as in terms of submitting the FAFSA, it's important to submit it online. You can save your work and not submit it, but if you just save it, it sounds like it could wipe out your work if you save it and you don't submit it. But I have not seen anything with the submissions being a problem. So for example, I submit my FAFSA and I need to mail in a paper signature page for my parent because my parent doesn't have a social security number. I can do that. Or I'm, as Dr. Neese was saying earlier, I'm a former foster youth. So I skip out of the questions providing parent information and I'm submitting my FAFSA, but essentially it's not completed. So there's no issue with those being wiped out. I've seen those often get cleared months and months down the road after students have submitted the required documents to get those things cleared, whether it's through us or through the Department of Ed. But if you're saving your work and you're not submitting it, that can be a problem. And I have seen that at times where students have made updates and they thought they fully submitted them, but they only saved it. So the important thing is to fully submit. If you know that you're going to have the information that you need to finalize your application the next day or the next 2 or 3 days, then by all means, just save your work and then go in a few days later and update it and submit. Because after you submit it, it's going to freeze your record for like 3 to 4 business days while the Department of Ed is processing it. Hope that helps y'all. Let me know if you have any other question about that. I'm more than happy to help.
Thanks so much, Jody. The other piece that I want to kind of wrap up a little bit is that sometimes it can be really confusing as to where to even think of reaching out to your higher ed institutions nearby and seeking what those partnerships might look like. A lot of campuses, particularly in the University of California system, have that K12 outreach center. Their centers for educational partnerships. That can be a great stepping point if your partner institution nearby is a University of California campus. Know that we all have those, and that can be that great first step. Financial aid offices themselves and the officers can be another really great step. People like Jody who work with FAFSA day in and day out, and they know that information, and they could be another resource, and they might not be the one that does the outreach in your school system or formalizes that partnership, but they're going to know who does. And just as the same way that Jody mentioned, she works closely with our services for undocumented students, and she works really closely with our Guardian Scholars Program, which is for foster and former foster youth, or with our Underground Scholars Program, which is for formerly incarcerated scholars that we have at the university. She knows all of those players. So again, she might not be the one that is doing that outreach or doing that work, but can serve as that great liaison because she knows the nuances of filling out a FAFSA or a CADA document, that those resources on our campuses can be really helpful and supportive in helping individuals who might have hesitancy or who might have specific questions because of their circumstances. So your financial aid officers can be a really good start. Your admission staff can be as well. One of the pieces that we're creating here at UC Merced, just to support our local high schools, is actually going to be hired in our admissions office, but it's going to be a joint position between admissions and financial aid that is just dedicated to doing outreach work and supporting you all in your schools with the FAFSA and CADA completion requirements. And so we are hiring a dedicated position that has financial aid background, but has this training and kind of admissions outreach and college going efforts to be able to partner with you all. So your admissions teams or your welcome centers on campus can be another great step. And they also often have resources or spaces that they can help reserve for you when you're doing those visits, and you might want to do a financial aid workshop on their campus. And then a lot of institutions have their educational opportunity programs, or as I mentioned, some special programs to support populations such as our undocumented scholars, our formerly incarcerated scholars, our foster and former foster youth. All of those programs provide opportunities to connect with. Educational opportunity programs serve low-income first-generation college students, and they can have a huge piece in connecting with you around the equity and access mission. So those could be another opportunity as you're looking for spots or places to go. But we know that we can be confusing bureaucracies in higher education. And we know that sometimes you might run into a person that you know that works on a college or university campus. They might not be that right point to open up those doors and that access. So we just wanted to share with you some potential starting points as you're thinking about that outreach and that outreach effort. And part of that is because we know that there is a shared goal. And we have a shared effort in helping to not only complete this requirement, but really supporting our scholars find that pathway to some post-secondary institution. We want them to know that they have the greatest array of possibilities from the greatest breadth of opportunities for their post-secondary education. And the more we can partner with you to provide that process and provide that access, that is part of our shared goal. And we want to work with you to make that happen.
Thank
We
you. If I
are
could just
over time.
interject-
So I'm going to turn it
Yeah.
back over to Pedro.
Thank you so much. Just a few minutes over, but that's okay. It was good information, and I know folks really much benefited from this, and they're asking me on a kind of side chat, is this available to all folks? So again, yes, the materials and the video itself will be made available to all by the end of the conference today, so you can access that. But I know you have another session to get to, so I do want to say thank you very much to our presenters. Thank you all. Have a great, thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful information. And have fun at your next session. I will go ahead and stop recording at this point and wish
Thanks,
you all
everyone.
a good day.
Thanks, Pedro, for hosting, and thanks, everyone, for joining. Take
Thank
care.
you.